and seasoned people that have looked at it is that this person came into our home when we were out for dinner on Christmas night, and then
Imagine walking into your neighbor's home on a quiet Sunday morning and finding a scene so disturbing, so meticulously staged, that even seasoned detectives would stand frozen in the doorway. Now imagine that despite thousands of hours of investigation, despite cutting-edge forensic technology, despite eyewitness accounts and physical evidence, no one has ever been arrested, no charges filed, no trial, no justice. This isn't the plot of a mystery novel. This is the reality of JonBenét Ramsey's murder, a case that has haunted America for nearly 3 decades. A 6-year-old beauty queen found dead in her own basement on December 26, 1996, in what should have been the safest place in the world, her home. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most analyzed, most debated, and most frustrating unsolved cases in American history. Because sometimes, the most terrifying part of a crime isn't what happened, it's that we may never know why. The Ramsey family seemed to have it all. John Ramsey was a successful businessman, CEO of Access Graphics, a computer services company that had recently reached $1 billion in revenue. His wife, Patsy, was a former beauty queen herself, having won the Miss West Virginia title in 1977. They lived in a sprawling 15-room Tudor-style mansion in Boulder, Colorado, an affluent neighborhood where violent crime was virtually unheard of. Their daughter, JonBenét, was a vibrant 6-year-old who competed in child beauty pageants, winning titles and trophies that lined the shelves of their home. To the outside world, they were the picture-perfect American family living the American dream. But on the morning of December 26, 1996, that dream shattered into a nightmare that continues to this day. Patsy Ramsey came downstairs around 5:50 in the morning and found a handwritten ransom note on the spiral staircase leading from the second floor to the kitchen. The note, written on paper from a notepad inside the Ramsey home, demanded $118,000 for the safe return of JonBenét. The amount was peculiar because it was nearly identical to the bonus John Ramsey had recently received from his company. Patsy immediately called 911 at 5:52 a.m., screaming that her daughter had been kidnapped. Police arrived within minutes, but what happened next would become one of the most criticized aspects of the entire investigation. The crime scene was not properly secured. Friends and family members were allowed to walk freely through the house. Potential evidence was contaminated or moved. Officers treated it as a kidnapping despite several red flags that should have indicated something far more sinister was at play. The ransom note itself was bizarre. At 2.5 pages long, it was one of the longest ransom notes ever documented. Most kidnapping notes are brief and to the point. This one rambled, made references to movies, and contained unusual phrases. Handwriting experts would later be unable to definitively rule out Patsy Ramsey as the author, though they couldn't confirm it either. For hours, the house was treated as the staging ground for a kidnapping negotiation that would never come. John Ramsey was instructed by the supposed kidnappers to gather the ransom money and wait for a phone call between 8 and 10 a.m. That call never came. By early afternoon, Detective Linda Arndt, who was at the scene, suggested that John Ramsey and family friend Fleet White search the house again for anything unusual. At approximately 1 p.m., John Ramsey went to the basement. What he found there would change everything. In a small storage room in the basement, sometimes referred to as the wine cellar, John Ramsey discovered his daughter's body. She was lying on the floor, covered with a white blanket. Her mouth had been covered with duct tape. A nylon cord was wrapped around her neck, attached to a wooden stick that had been used to tighten it like a garrote. Her wrists had been loosely bound with cord. John Ramsey immediately pulled the duct tape from her mouth and carried her body upstairs, contaminating crucial evidence in his panic and grief. Detective Arndt, who was alone with multiple people in the house at that point, lost control of the scene entirely. The body was moved. Evidence was touched. The chain of custody that is vital to any criminal investigation was irreparably broken. The autopsy revealed the horrific details of JonBenét's final moments. She had died from asphyxiation due to strangulation, but she had also suffered a massive skull fracture. The medical examiner determined that she had been struck on the head with a blunt object with such force that it caused an 8.5-inch linear fracture in her skull and significant brain bleeding. There was also evidence that she had been sexually assaulted, though the extent and nature of this assault has been debated by experts for years. Fibers consistent with the clothing Patsy Ramsey wore that night were found on the duct tape used to cover JonBenét's mouth. A palm print that didn't match any family member was found on the wine cellar door. DNA evidence that didn't match anyone in the family was discovered in John Bennett's underwear and beneath her fingernails. From the very beginning, the investigation was plagued by problems. The Boulder Police Department had little experience with homicide cases, particularly one of this magnitude. The media descended on Boulder like a swarm, turning the case into a national obsession. The Ramseys hired lawyers almost immediately, which they had every right to do, but which also created an adversarial relationship with investigators. Within days, the case became not just about finding a killer, but about public perception, media narratives, and conflicting theories that would divide investigators and the public for decades. The primary theory that dominated early investigation was that someone inside the home was responsible. The Boulder police focused heavily on John and Patsy Ramsey, operating under the assumption that John Bennett's death was the result of an accident that the parents covered up, staging it to look like an intruder attack. This theory was supported by several pieces of evidence. There were no clear signs of forced entry into the home. The ransom note was written on paper from inside the house, using a pen that was then placed back in its holder. The note referenced John Ramsey's bonus amount, suggesting intimate knowledge of the family's finances. Some investigators believed the elaborate staging of the crime scene, including the garrote and the ransom note, was an attempt to misdirect the investigation away from the family. However, the intruder theory also had substantial evidence supporting it. An unidentified boot print was found near John Bennett's body. The DNA found in her underwear and under her fingernails didn't match anyone in the family or anyone in the FBI's CODIS database. A basement window was found open with a suitcase positioned beneath it, possibly used as a step. Neighbors reported seeing unfamiliar cars in the alley behind the Ramsey home on the night of the murder. Several people in Boulder reported receiving strange phone calls around the time of John Bennett's death. And perhaps most compellingly, there had been a history of an unusual number of reported prowlers and attempted break-ins in the Ramsey neighborhood in the months leading up to the murder. Over the years, numerous suspects have emerged, been investigated, and then cleared. John Mark Carr confessed to the murder in 2006 while living in Thailand, creating international headlines. However, his DNA didn't match the evidence found at the scene, and he was quickly ruled out. Gary Oliva, a convicted sex offender who was in Boulder at the time of the murder and had a collection of disturbing photos of John Bennett, has long been considered a person of interest, but has never been charged. Michael Helgoth, a man who died by suicide shortly after the murder and who owned boots that matched the print found at the scene, was investigated but never definitively connected to the crime. Bill McReynolds, who played Santa Claus at a Ramsey Christmas party days before the murder, was investigated after his wife wrote a play in 1970 for that eerily paralleled John Bennett's death, but he was eventually cleared by DNA evidence as well. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney at the time, Mary Lacey, issued a public apology to the Ramsey family. New DNA testing using touch DNA technology had revealed genetic material on John Bennett's long johns that matched the DNA found in her underwear. This DNA belonged to an unidentified male and was found in 2 separate locations on her clothing. Based on this evidence, Lacey formally cleared John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, who had died of ovarian cancer in 2006, and their son Burke of any involvement in John Bennett's death. However, this exoneration has remained controversial. The case was officially returned to the Boulder Police Department in 2009, and it remains open and active to this day. In 2013, previously sealed grand jury indictments from 1999 were released. District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment, stating there was insufficient evidence to prosecute the case successfully. This revelation added another layer of controversy and confusion to an already convoluted investigation. Modern developments in forensic science have given investigators new hope. Advanced genealogical DNA testing, especially with DNA samples that may be degraded after nearly 3 decades. One crime scene that should have provided answers instead generated only more questions. Despite nearly 3 decades of investigation, despite hundreds of suspects interviewed, the evidence will speak clearly enough that justice, however delayed, can finally be served.